All right, this is David, and this is a supplement to the show that aired on December the 7th, 2013 on our local affiliate station, KARN 102.9 FM. And many of you, of course, are watching from the podcast around the country and around the world. So what I discussed on this particular broadcast was how the very definition of risk is oftentimes misunderstood, and it's no exception when it comes to the world of investments. So really, it's important to understand why much of the prevalent mindset of achieving retirement savings objectives is often synonymous with taking more risk. Risk can be defined as exposure to loss. So let me give you some synonyms for risk, which include to endanger, and I just Googled this, so to endanger, to jeopardize, to gamble with, to take chances with, to put on the line, to put in jeopardy. So you see, the greatest definition of risk is the likelihood of total loss or of loss. So most people mistakenly associate risk related to their retirement savings with the probability that they will hit it out of the park, quote unquote, or win big by experiencing higher rates of return. But I want to be clear, the true definition of risk is the likelihood of loss. So let's think through this logic for a moment, and now I'm going to validate much of what I talk about on that particular broadcast by going through this math with you. Okay, in the example that I gave on the broadcast, we said an annual income earner of $100,000 household income that's saving 10% of their income. Now, I always say the actual ideal financial prescription would be 20% going to savings, 0% debt load other than your mortgage. But in this example, we're going to say $100,000, $10,000 going to savings with a 5% real rate of return. So let's calculate the interest on the savings, which is $500, which leaves $90,000 for lifestyle consumption after taxes. So let's continue and see if there is a more efficient way to go about doing this than focusing on chasing higher rates of return. Well, first of all, as I said earlier, in the retirement planning world, typically retirement savings objectives are synonymous with taking on more risk. And again, risk can be defined as exposure to loss. And some synonyms I just gave bears worth repeating: to endanger, jeopardize, to gamble with, to take chances on, to put on the line, to put in jeopardy. So as I said, the greatest definition of risk is the likelihood of loss. So the typical conversation is, well, Mr. Investor, what you need to do is take on more risk. And again, it's hard to believe, but the American public has been sold this. So we are told we need to dump into mutual funds or in the market, and let's say we could get 10%. In that same example, we go from our $10,000 in annual savings earning $500 a year, as we noted before. Just to reiterate, 5%, you earned a whopping $500 on your $10,000 investment that year. And by following common strategies and advice, taking on more risk, now you earned a whopping $1,000 if you actually achieve that, because of course when there's risk, there's no guarantee of any interest earned, much less any return of principal. So what if instead of focusing on higher rates of return, we look at reducing expenses? Now, I'm not talking about expenses in lifestyle, meaning, and I talked about on the broadcast, there are three types of money. There's accumulated money, and this is typically where advisors focus. In other words, how much, Mr. Investor, do you need to save over a 30-year period, at what rate of return to achieve a safe or an expected income in retirement? And then there's lifestyle money, and everyone can identify this. This is the money that you're spending today to maintain your standard of living. These are the house you live in, the cars you drive, the amount of vacations you take, how many times you go out to the movie, etc., etc. What you're spending today on lifestyle. And lastly, there's what we call transferred money, and this is money you're typically transferring away unknowingly and unnecessarily. So what if we focused on, instead of higher rates of return, we focus on just identifying not 10%, but 3%, let's say, of money you're losing unknowingly and unnecessarily. Taxes, the way you go about paying your mortgage, the way you manage college funding, the way you handle major purchases throughout your life. We're not talking about cutting into lifestyle. I want to be very clear. We're talking about identifying and being more efficient with what you're already doing. So not losing money or identifying money you're currently losing unknowingly, not necessarily. So if we can just identify by being more efficient, as I said on the broadcast, the way you spend your money is equally as important as the act of actually saving your money. So if we can find a better way to be more efficient with your cash flow and we reduce that by just 3%, that saves you an additional $2,700 that year. So that is the equivalent return of investment on 27% on what the $10,000 you're already investing, which can be proven by the fact that 27% of $10,000 is $2,700. Now, so we achieved a 27% return by simply identifying money we were losing unknowingly and unnecessarily. Reducing expenses is good financial management because this takes no risk. This, by chasing higher rates of return, takes significantly more risk, certainly with no guarantee of the outcome and potentially a loss of your initial investment or principal. So this is very important that you understand this concept as we move forward. And I want to make sure I'm clear. This 3% of $2,700 is of the $90,000, what was left over prior to taxes for lifestyle consumption. So if we can just reduce or find areas that are going to potentially taxes, for instance, and that equals $2,700, then that's the equivalent of a 27% return on what we were already doing with taking no additional risk. And taxes, again, is one of those areas where most people, I've interviewed several people. I wrote the foreword for Darren Hamilton in his book, and what he says is about at least a third of individuals are paying taxes unnecessarily, a third or more. And $1 paid in taxes unnecessarily not only cost you that dollar, but what that dollar could have earned you over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years had you not transferred it away to someone else. So this is a perfect example of being, when we talk about being more efficient with our dollars and taking less risk or no risk in achieving superior results with no risk. What I have talked about in my book, Retirement Without Risk.